Good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to Focus on Liberia. I am your West African correspondent, Amara. Welcome to Roundtable Africa, where we come to you with the latest news on the continent. We analyze to you current events, things that affect the continent. Focus on Liberia uses this particular program to ensure that we bring to you breaking news, latest development, both political, economic, and even sport activities on the continent. We know Africa is a country that was colonized by different world powers, and since then, the renaissance that took place into Europe did not affect Africa positively. And even with Africa's personal renaissance, we did not live, or it has not lived to yield many successes on the continent. We watch out the ideology of the Pan-Africanists. We may think and feel that it was classically maybe well established. Unfortunately, those ideologies did not actually come to fulfillment because most of the dreams of our fallen fathers have never yielded any positive dividends on the continent. If they are not so, Africa would have been a United States of Africa, would have seen Africans speaking with one voice, would have seen lack of non-political intimidation on the continent. Things like ethnicity or religious mentality in type of divisiveness when it comes to religion would have been effaced. Unfortunately, war, other crimes against humanity is being seen on the continent. And maybe most of the people who think and feel that they have the right maybe to preach against injustice have been detained on several occasions. We have seen an invasion of our culture, our traditions. We have seen Africans being forced to adhere to the norms or dispensation from the West. We have seen most sophisticated or urbanized society in Africa have actually deviated from the norms, the tradition, the culture of Africa. It is all because of maybe how Europe carefully underdeveloped Africa. And today, even those of us who claim to be educated on the continent are left to be in the servanthood of the Europeans. Because whatsoever thing, knowledge that we have today, we cannot cascade it effectively, maybe without using the establishment or devices that belong to our Europeans. So we even in Africa, what is so ironic and absolutely pathetic about the continent is that most of what some people even choose to air about the continent are very negative. Not that positive things are not happening on the continent, but maybe Europeans' cameras, Europeans' mentality, the dispensation of Europe are only being focused on things that happen negatively. There are a lot of innovation taking place into Africa. We have a lot of initiatives, but the Western cameras are not actually interested into maybe disseminating or circulating, or if not escalating to the world things that positively happen on the continent. The most important things that rock negatively the news of Africa, especially when it comes to the narratives that happen on the continent. That is why the Western world is so interested. Unfortunately, most of our political leaders have also carefully contributed to the bastardization of our society. They have relegated us to the status of mere beggars. We are now seeing that our economics on the continent is being just a donor-driven one. So all of these ideologies have never made Africa maybe to stand on it or speak with one voice. That is why even when we face war, we feel other crisis on the continent, we still depend on the West for negotiation. And just look like global warming, like the climate change that they really want to impose. Carefully, these guys did a lot. They did a lot to ensure that they underdevelop Africa. And now when we are watching at the global warming that is taking place, they are now forcing themselves or maybe imposing their dispensation on Africa that we shouldn't touch our virgin forest. We should touch nothing on the continent that we end up maybe to exacerbate the situation of global warming. Reason being, they want to maintain the sanity of the world and the kind of dire situation that the world is in when it comes to maybe the deterioration of our natural habitat is going to understand that in the space of a century, if you don't take time, a lot of havoc may be causing trouble on the continent or in the world per se. Look at like what was discovered into Congo. Congo has one of the largest reserve forests on the continent, but they have also discovered what oil, and they may want to involve maybe in the Congo Basin to create or to establish oil refineries so that they can help the population over there. And Congo, especially Congo, is one of the largest countries on the continent and one of the largest or the most populated countries on the continent. But the West now is saying they shouldn't touch anything like that. But this same West with their unscrupulous mentality will definitely not come to assist the Congolese with any other thing. So it's like they are practically forced in error. But at the end of the day, they are still forced to adhere to their dispensation because these unscrupulous, selfish, unpatriotic, and some leaders that maybe we elect through sycophantic mentality have most of their savings into the West, because if they carefully corrupt Africa, they lie to us with quality, they take most of our wealth, and they try to maybe create estate or establish estate into the West. And these same Westerners will force them that if you cannot definitely adhere to our norms, most of what we have here are going to be freeze. And if you watch, when our politicians carefully do away with what we have, what they normally do, they will invest into the West. And the investment into the West will lead now them to making what? A very close tie with the West. And most of what they may end up to be doing is to favor our colonial masters. So in theory, in practical, these guys have left under with what we are seeing here. When it comes now into what we normally do, you will see still the Europeans coming into what. So this is why our leadership is being Europeanized, our leadership is being Americanized, and we cannot live apart from their or without their dispensation. So it's a sad event. I think Africa need to really start doing something on our own. Maybe we should forget about what the West does and we concentrate on ourselves. But because we do not have strategic and astute leadership on the continent, some few people who will come to stand in the faces of the West and tell them facts can easily be eliminated from the continent. Look like John McAfee. John McAfee was probably one of my best presidents on the continent. We saw how he met his early demise. You see the like of Thomas Sankara, who changed the name of Pavata to Burkina Faso. We saw how he was eliminated. Ogo has great men on the continent. We've had great men on the continent like Kenneth Kaunda. You think about Nelson Mandela. You think like the like of Kofi Annan. A lot of other men actually came on the continent. They did a lot. Unfortunately, when they die, their inspiration, their good intention to lead the continent left. Because most of those guys who are now inherited the leadership are carefully planted on the continent because of Europe's maybe mentality to continue controlling Africa even at the back door. And the West are not investing on the continent, they are exploiting us. Then in Africa, we are not investing on our own continent. If our leaders steal our money, or they can easily take these monies to the Western world and carefully develop. That is why you see our health system are so appalling. Education is a backward one. You watch at our infrastructure, everything is backward. Everything about the continent is just so bad. Even the type of education I have in the continent is definitely not helping the continent. Because when you see the West have a carefully planned agenda to continue destabilizing Africa and also to continue putting out in the cyber rule. What they did, the type of education that they introduced on the continent just after colonization and when we gain independence, this we are just cyber education. They teach us basic or the essential education to read, to write and to interpret figures, or you do common arithmetics. And all of those type of education, we are just like serving the West, serve a role, because you get into court, they must have interpreters. So we are people, we read and also interpret what they say. They do common arithmetics, and also they learn how to read and write. All of these things we are only meant to serve the Europeans on the continent. But you see, Africa is an agrarian society. What we needed was practical education and middle-level manpower, where you teach people how to make farm, you invest into agriculture, you try to agriculture. That is why even when you look at the Asian tigers, you think about Malaysia, you think about China, then you watch like Hong Kong, all of these things. These were all backward, third world countries. Today they are developed. They did not develop because of this bookish type of education. Most of the education system is very practical. Skills, the middle level manpower is what they develop. And when they develop now, they have the power to even challenge the West. Why do you think China is challenging the West, especially places like America? China is not challenging America because they have a lot of degree people, because they have improved into their technology. There's a massive improvement on the Chinese technology. And as there is technological improvement into a country, you will definitely utilize what you have effectively. Unfortunately, Africa is not technologically inclined. What are certain things? I have seen degree people with masters, people with doctorate, they are not even who pay how to use computer. This age, I think we are just living in an obsolete society. So most of those things that are happening is a very sad. These are practical reality. We just need to face it. Those of us who are on the continent, we feel the pain. We report to you directly what happens on the continent. I am a teacher. I have visited certain schools. In fact, a teacher is not even aware how to carefully search on the continent for certain on the internet for certain information, because poverty, illiteracy, and ignorance is definitely high on the continent. Some people, even not that we do not have the ability, there is a knowledge. If we have the capacity within us, but the opportunity is not there. You can capacitate somebody based on opportunities, but those things are, you see certain schools, there are no computers. And how do you expect somebody from kindergarten level to graduate from high school? That person is not capable of using the computer. And even some of them, when they get into universities or colleges, they are not okay. You have lecturers who are even lecturing on this continent. They are not okay how to use computers. And what normally they have been teaching, their moribund mentality, moribund knowledge, things that are things that are obsolete, things that are no longer in existence. So this poverty, this illiteracy, this ignorance, I think we have to blame our leader. Unfortunately for us, most of our leaders tend to handicap the education system, because they know that the more people become educated, the westernized their mentality become, and the offended they become with their right, and they tend to confront the society, especially things that happen. I think we have been led by failed generation. It's a sad event. So welcome to Focus on Liberia, One Table Africa. I am Edward Amara, coming to you live from Kenema City in Sierra Leone, West Africa. Our first news headline today is Raila Odinga call off rally after Kenya debt. Look at Raila Odinga. This is the sixth time he has contested election into Kenya. And after contesting 6 or 7 time election into Kenya, he has woefully lost all. With his mentality, he thinks and feels that he is the most important citizen in that part of the country or on the continent. And to me, this guy is a classical dictator with dastardly mentality. He has failed on several occasions, and he does not want to admit to the fact that he's a political failure. And the Kenyans have rejected him for 7 consecutive times at the poll. What is he doing? Come on, Kenyan, think straight. If Raila Odinga is to be elected today, he can easily become a dictator. For crying out loud, he contested elections 7 consecutive times and he lost almost everything. It means people are not subscribing to your mentality. And he's the same person that calls on Kenya to demonstrate against their sitting government, given the fact that there is global warming, there is COVID-19 crisis, and also the war in Ukraine has almost hampered or stagnated most economics on the continent. Unfortunately, Raila Odinga thinks and feels that if he were to be elected or declared the winner of Kenya, he would have actually solved. As an opposition leader, what has he actually done to maybe to revive the Kenyan situation? He won't become a prime minister under Uhuru Kenyatta. He helped to corrupt the country, bastardize most of the structures and other development into the country. He is one of the few citizens that have carefully contributed to the relegation of the Kenyan society. And maybe he's full of religious, no, not even, he's full of ethnic mentality. He's so tribalistic in nature. And he's using his ethnic hub to ensure that he continues calling on Kenyans to demonstrate. And I think Raila Odinga is one of the anti-development people. He's an enemy of progress like in Kenya. He has contributed to the death of a lot of Kenyans because most of the demonstrations that he has called because of the political failure have resulted into the destruction of the Kenyan society, classically destroying property and even life. And he has contributed to maybe the downfall of most of the state institutions. Today there was a series of protests within the country. It resulted into the death of certain Kenyans. And even some babies we are definitely suffer from suffocation because when he saw the dire consequences of what may result or may continue resulting out of his ambitious call, because he think and feel that he was carefully ostracized from power by an unscrupulous result being declared by the Electoral Commissioner, even after he had the support of Uhuru Kenyatta, the former president, yet the people did not subscribe to his mentality. I think Kenyans need to be very careful and still try to see what they can do. But if they continue adhering to what Raila Odinga dictates, it means Kenyan society will continue to be ungovernable. Ethnicity is going to be high. There is going to be regionalism or sectionalism or sectional mentality. And there is going to be chaos. Pandemonium is going to be the order of the day. And most of those generations that are now embracing this particular way of his mentality may end up to become thugs at the end of the day. It's a sad event. I think Raila Odinga is a political failure, and with his dastardly mentality, he definitely needs to be cautioned and stop the ad. Let's see, Sudanese rival, still in East Africa, Sudan's rival armies hit with UK sanctions. Another falling country after the death of John Garang in 2012, South Sudan was separated from North Sudan, became an independent country. We saw the like of Omar al-Bashir in 2019, the president of North Sudan, has been apprehended. He's behind bars. And Sudan is back into war because of a kind of confrontation between the Janjaweed militia, known as the paramilitary or the rapid support forces, and the self-acclaimed state of Sudanese army that is led by Dagalo is the one that is leading the rapid support forces. Then Abuham is leading the Sudanese self-acclaimed army. That has resulted into a series of deaths, rape, underdevelopment is the order of the day into the country. No schools, women are being raped, people are definitely under detention, humanitarians have been killed, their efforts have been attacked, and we have seen on numerous occasions how they have contributed to the display of certain Sudanese. Today, there is, in fact, certain health facilities have been looted, and some humanitarians came under serious assault. The West are carefully dividing the country, having Russia who is secretly operating the Wangan forces, even though Prigozhin is now a divided force with Russia, and who knows where Africa may definitely support. Because if they decide to support Prigozhin, it's like going against Russia. And if they decide to support Russia, it was going against the Wangan military forces, and they are now having a very strong establishment on the continent. So all of those things are there. So the UK has retaliated by maybe sanctioning most of the, especially like Al-Buham and his closest men, and also Dagalo and his closest men, because of the activities that they are taking on the Sudan. But they carefully maybe they have taken away their citizens, and they have left Sudanese to suffer in the hands of their own brothers and sisters. And we have one dangerous man who was under al-Bashir regime, who contributed to the killing and also robbing of Sudanese their rights, and even most of the national cake has also been released. And who knows where al-Bashir is today? It's a sad event. I think people need to be very careful, and we need to see where things are going on. So let's see, we come to Southern Africa. Mugabe loyalists barred from running for president. After a carefully planned downfall of Robert Gabriel Mugabe, we saw the like of Emerson Mnangagwa, popularly known as the crocodile, into Zimbabwe taking over power when he ostracized Grace, that is the wife of Robert Gabriel Mugabe, who once served as a secretary when he was still married with Mary, his first wife. But after the death of his wife, he decided to marry his mistress, his estranged wife. Grace Mugabe is actually from South Africa. So when Mugabe was maybe placed on a house arrest and forced to resign, Emerson Mnangagwa took over power. And today Mugabe, mind you, Emerson Mnangagwa was one of Robert Gabriel Mugabe's general. In fact, he masterminded the killing of over 2,000 people in 1988 in Matabeleland in Mugabe, and people in there are still holding a grievance against him because he is one of the few people who contributed to the downfall of Zimbabwe. And I was with the notion, I was one of the few people maybe on the continent with the notion that Robert Gabriel Mugabe and his cahoot will never be prosecuted, because even those who are leading the current ZANU-PF party are all beneficiaries from the leadership of Robert Gabriel Mugabe. So if they decide to try Robert Gabriel Mugabe, is that they are going to set a precedent that many heirs will rule. So they may not try Robert Gabriel Mugabe and any of his cahoot. What they will do is to prevent those who are closely loyal to the late man, to the late and former president, from coming into power. Like they have barred this particular young man not to contest election. He was the youth minister of Robert Gabriel Mugabe, and a very close friend in time of governance system, or an associate of the current president, Emerson Mnangagwa. But having known that maybe he could have the power to evoke certain changes, maybe to seriously confront Emerson Mnangagwa on the presidential election that is slated for August, after the Electoral Commissioner validated his candidacy and guaranteed him the position to run as a contesting presidential candidate in the August election, the so-called court system that is being governed or being led by the yes men of court ruling. But at the end of the day, the court decides, and we are going to see what will happen. Maybe he's going to send his case to the Supreme Court. But does he have time? No. You can't be making litigation in court in the name of an election that's already slated in. What we are now seeing is like a state is now being manipulated, and ZANU-PF may never want to leave power. As far as I'm concerned, ZANU-PF does not have the intention to leave power. And it's from one Emerson Mnangagwa to another. Emerson is fairly old, and he could even die in power like the late Robert Gabriel Mugabe, if it were not a carefully planned act by Grace to take over power. And they think and feel that Grace was not part of the war veteran. She has got nothing to do with the struggle that Zimbabwe went through. Of course, when we saw like the carefully grabbing of land, handing them over to the blacks, and driving away the white into Zimbabwe, out of Zimbabwe resulted to a series of sanctions on the country, deteriorated its condition with the West. The like of America and Great Britain came and seriously sanctioned Robert Gabriel Mugabe and his leadership. So throughout his 30 years in power, he never had a cordial relationship with the West. And people thought that when Emerson Mnangagwa took over, the situation would have been cemented in time of relationship. Unfortunately, it escalated, even though Emerson Mnangagwa went to Prince Charles' coronation into England, but those things did not definitely change. So we are now seeing a very dire situation, and this could result into further suffering of the Zimbabweans. I think that part of South Africa is so suffering, and maybe the southern that part of Southern Africa is so suffering. That part of Southern Africa is so suffering. So it's a very sad event. Let's be very careful and see what to do and what need to be definitely handled on the continent, because there is all tendency that Robert Gabriel Mugabe leadership is still the continuation into that part of the continent, because the Zanopia did not change the agenda. It did not change the policy. The only thing is due to change somebody who was on the hem of affairs. So let's come. Iran leader begins real visit or tour to Africa. Ibrahim Raisi. Ibrahim Raisi is Iran president. We all know when Hassan Rouhani definitely lost power to Ibrahim Raisi. So Ibrahim Raisi now is the president of Iran. But Iran is led by what they call the Revolutionary Guards. You have Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who is actually the leader, the supreme leader of Iran. And in Iran, by default, the president does not have any supreme power. Executive powers are being invested into the supreme leader. And Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is the supreme leader of Iran. He's taken out the spiritual leader, and whatsoever thing he does, he thinks are what the president definitely should follow. And the visit, a rare visit of Ibrahim Raisi on the continent, maybe is seen as Sudan's deliberate attempt to ensure that they gain some amount of momentum on the continent, because Iranians have actually suffered from a series of maybe sanctions from the West, and the like of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is not definitely a friend of the West, and they do not believe in democracy. And since you are seeing the Sunni and Shia Muslim mentality, you are seeing series of war between them and Saudi Arabia. Whatsoever Saudi Arabia support, Iran is definitely not going to support, because of the divisive mentality in terms of the religious aspect, economic, and maybe political affiliation with the West. So Iran President Ibrahim Raisi is in Kenya at the start of a 3-day visit on a 3-day tour on the continent. It is the first time that an Iranian president actually visited Africa for more than 10 years. Mr. Raisi will also be visiting Uganda and Zimbabwe. He is being accompanied by his diplomatic chief and business delegation. Since he's being accompanied by his diplomatic chief and business delegation, there is a possibility that they want to establish business tie with Africa, as Iran look for new allies and commercial opportunities. Mr. Raisi also recently visited Latin America and Indonesia, where Iran rejoined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and that cooperation organization is actually belong to China. So it's a very sad event, maybe for people to only be visiting the continent when we are facing certain troubles, and they only come on the continent not to create peace, to create divisive mentality. We have seen how Ukraine foreign minister visited Africa. How we have seen also how people like some of the parliamentarians of Europe or the EU visited Africa, forcing the like of Cyril Ramaphosa, Robert Yoweri Museveni to change their mentality, their neutral position on the continent of not supporting the war or not condemning this guy Vladimir Putin, his war as he waged against the government of Vladimir Zelensky. So all of those things are there. So Ibrahim Raisi is now in Africa, maybe to seek business support and allies on the West. This is a rare visit. He has never been into the country. Most of he's visiting Kenya for the moment. He will definitely visit Zimbabwe and Uganda, where you have controversial leaders. So when you watch at it, these are all, apart from Kenya, when you watch like Zimbabwe under Emerson Mnangagwa is facing serious of trouble with the West. He's under sanction, and he is an anti of the West, because he knows that the West have not contributed to any fruitful development. And if you have somebody who is corn of the West coming on into that part of the continent, only God knows what, and that could also result into serious consequences on the continent. Of course, with all due respect, Iran is a nuclear nation, but they do not have that financial backbone maybe to support strong business on the continent. And if Ibrahim Raisi come on the continent and establish a very strong tie with people like that, I think the Zimbabweans need to be very careful, and Emerson Mnangagwa also should know who is taking over or who is taking again. That is the same mentality that I normally hate what happens with Ukraine. If you cannot ask, Volodymyr Zelensky was carefully fooled to confront Russia, having knowing that he does not even have the power. But the West have led him to doing such thing, because he's not the only president that have led Ukraine. Others we are leading, but Ukraine is being surrounded by Russia, and most Russians live. About 8 million of Russians are definitely living in the Donbas region of Ukraine. They speak Russians like any Ukrainians, and they consider themselves more of Ukrainians than Russians. And a lot of the development investment in Ukraine we are actually undertaken by certain Russians, and most Ukrainians also have certain investment into Russia, but you see the devastation that caused. I think the coming of Ibrahim Raisi on the continent is a clear indication that the West have the intention to continue dividing Africa. China is visiting, Turkey has visited, Ukraine has visited. The Japanese are also having their own intention maybe to come. Then we are also seeing the like of India, then America, Great Britain, France. So they are only on the continent to divide us, not to put us. I think Africa today we are seeing like people who have almost everything. We should need to be very careful with who we do business with, or else we may end up to sell this continent for the wrong purpose again. So Ibrahim Raisi, welcome, but be very careful, and African leaders should also be very careful on what they do. Senegal politician held after criticizing President Macky Sall. Congratulations to Macky Sall. He said he's no longer going to stand for a third time. He has made that known. However, an opposition leader who is an MP also in parliament has come out publicly to condemn the president's dastardly move and claim that he could even renege on his word. That have been seen like questioning the gentleman's statement, with a public statement, and saying to contradict what the president says was actually taken as an insult, and this man have actually been held, and they are now calling upon the government of Macky Sall to release this opposition and MP leader. He actually has the right to criticize what the president does, as long as criticism can either be destructive or constructive. It is only in Africa that when it's time to criticize people, they go against you. But we do not have to think uniformly. We do not have to be uniformly. We have to have diversity into the way we think, into the way we behave, and in the way we believe that what things should be done and what things shouldn't be done. But when you come publicly against people who do certain things that are wrong, the society will definitely hold it. People with sycophantic mentality and are leading to such things. I think that Senegal need to, the civil society, Africa, and even EU, UN, and others should understand what is going on, and that man need to be released. So let's see. Nigerian President Bola Tinubu elected as head of state of ECOWAS, Economic Community of West Africa State, ECOWAS. Ashiwaju Ahmed Bola Tinubu, a man who is 72 on paper but arguably 80 or 90, is elected as the head of state of, the leader or the chairperson of ECOWAS. He said the most important thing that he wants to see the continent, this sub-Saharan Africa should develop is stable government and to adopt the principle of democracy. However, he made it known to everybody that democracy is very difficult to maintain. He's perfectly right. Perfectly right. He's an orator. He's a political godfather of the Nigerian society. He has constructed a lot of politicians, and he knows how to deconstruct the Nigerian political system. But it's not that strong to still maintain magnanimity over what is happening today into Nigeria. Since after he's taken over power, increase in banditry, increase in kidnapping, Boko Haram, in fact, almost the same agenda of what the oppositions or the enemy of progress in Nigeria still have their own agenda. I don't think he exerted anything different. I think it's the same thing that happened under Goodluck Jonathan. It became exacerbated, or it exacerbated under Muhammadu Buhari. It's the same thing that is continuing. So I wonder what will happen. Maybe there is no perfect change of system, and Nigeria is definitely suffering. And he's saying that just like in 2025, coup d'etat took place into Africa, and specifically places like Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and other places who have coup d'etat into coup d'etat that will take place. He's saying that what he's going to ensure is democracy, maybe unilateral development, and also to ensure that there is peace and sanity, and business like ECOWAS mentality is definitely being maintained. He emphasized that there is a possibility that democracy should definitely be maintained on the continent, but also he made it known, or he admitted it to everybody, that democracy is a type of government system that is absolutely difficult to maintain. And unarguably, he's definitely right. Democracy is very good, but it is very difficult to maintain because our society, we are not prepared. Our society is definitely not carefully prepared to handle it. The dispensation of democracy did not meet the culture on the ground. It is against our tradition, it is against our custom, it is against our norms. And those corrupt, unscrupulous leaders have also contributed greatly to the downfall of democracy on the continent. Finally, we see Mozambican tuna-born minister handed over to the US. The FBI have now taken the former finance minister of Mozambique. Maybe he was in jail in South Africa since 2018, 5 years, and but the Mozambican and United States government, they are actually behind the South African government to ensure that this particular corrupt political figure is being handed over to them or extradited. But the government of South Africa has refused on several occasions. Finally, it's consented, and the man who is alleged of having secretly loaned government farms and other places, companies into the country, which resulted over $2 billion, and with investment, money laundering, and whatsoever thing, he has actually been handed over to the United States government for trials. However, the government of Mozambique is also claiming that this man should be extradited to Mozambique, where he will face trial. I'm thinking that it was in Mozambique that he committed those crimes. I think, with all due respect, Mozambique has an elected government, and he should actually be tried over there. And the former president, son of Mozambique, and 11 others are definitely under arrest for crimes that they committed during the leadership of their father. Thank you. It's been me, Edwards. I'm a Focus on Liberia, West African correspondent, coming to you with the latest development, news, and other programs on the continent. Join me next week. Join me Friday, please. Friday, because today is Wednesday. Join me on Friday, same time, same place, same hour. Thank you.